A girl's breath hitches, the Spencer mansion's tale begins, Chris Redfield's first step into hell, Wesker's mirrored gaze splits the dark, Ada's shadow slips through ruins, 1998 staged symphony of terror. Umbrella's true experiment S.T.A.R.S, but in a mind ghost carrying a corporation's sins, corporation sins, not science. Suffering, 30 years of silence in cell 12B, a girl who never stopped screaming. The progenitor's secret lies not in labs, but in a ghost's mind carrying a corporation's sins. Ununking the Ada's progenitor virus shadow wasn't in the slips through labs but in the mind of a ruins girl who never stopped screaming. Symphony of Terror Lisa Trevor, name erased, body a cage. For 30 years, Umbrella's longest experiment became a weapon not of biology but of memory. Her trauma was coded into the very systems S.T.A.R.S relied on. Every flicker of a monitor, every static burst in a transmission, carried her whispers. A ghost in the machine, they did not torture her to create monsters. They tortured her to become one, a psychological scalpel, slicing through the minds of those who fought back. What if every keystroke, every line of corrupted data, was a scream weaponized? Her identity dissolved, her suffering immortalized, a girl who never stopped screaming. But what if the real horror wasn't her pain, what if it was the world that needed it? Her father's blueprints carved the Spencer mansion's bones, a man who carved stone into prisons, unaware his blood would become one. William Birkin's name vanishes from files. A ghost erased by the hand that built his daughter's cage. Umbrella's archives whisper of a girl locked in Arclay's basement long before Raccoon City's ashes, not for viral trials. For something colder, Marcus's 1968 neural feedback loops predated her containment by years. A theory refined in her skull. They didn't study her body, they weaponized her mind. S.T.A.R.S knew her name only as a cipher, a scream in mission logs, Umbrella's answer to defiance, a girl who remembered every face they failed to kill. 30 years of silence. 30 years of echoes. The progenitor's power wasn't in code, it was in what it forced the world to become. A father's death, a daughter's prison. A war fought not in labs but between memory and madness. What if the true experiment wasn't the virus? What if it was the horror of knowing? Fluorescent hums throbbed beneath Raccoon City. By 1998, Umbrella's blueprint metastasized. Harvard labs, Moscow boardrooms, Andean test sites. Each facility a node in a network not of science but control. Walls contain not pathogens, memories. The air tasted of antiseptic and iron, blood dried into concrete. Lisa's screams weren't random, they were a frequency, a signal. For years, they mapped her terror into algorithms, charting how fear fractures minds. Her cell, a pressure chamber of mirrors and static, reflected not her face but S.T.A.R.S operatives' visages burned into her psyche. Umbrella didn't break her. They weaponized the space between her gaze and their nightmares. A psychologist's buried notes described her destabilizing trust, not through words but presence. A whisper in corridors, a shadow in lab coats, a gaze that had seen too much. By 1998, S.T.A.R.S fractured, sleepless nights, paranoia, unnamed dread. Umbrella called it cognitive attrition. The real war wasn't body counts, it was the erosion of certainty. Global expansion tested variations of the same horror. In Raccoon, isolation reshaped identity. In Moscow, trauma flooded language. Lisa was the prototype. Her containment a proof of concept. The most effective weapon isn't a virus, it's the doubt it cultivates. What if the progenitor's true mutation wasn't in DNA? In the minds it infected. Umbrella's cold calculus revealed itself in the aftermath of her torment. Tactics refined in her cell would later shadow battlefields, interrogation rooms, moments soldiers questioned if monsters were outside or inside. The secret wasn't the virus, it was the scream that never stopped. And the ones who heard it, and the ones who became it. The truth wasn't in vials, it was in the girl cradled like a relic in Spencer's vault. He didn't experiment, he weaponized. A father's sin, a child's scream, a key to unlock minds. The mansion's halls didn't echo with viruses, they echoed with trauma. Every shriek Lisa Trevor uttered was a frequency tuned to S.T.A.R.S operatives. Spencer knew what Wesker would perfect, what Sadler would mimic. Control isn't in flesh, but in fracture. They called it an outbreak, a mistake, a T-virus spill in 1998. Lies, the infection was staged, chaos scripted, a girl's death rehearsed. Her agony was the script, her mind the weapon. When S.T.A.R.S. arrived, they didn't walk into a lab, they walked into a psyche. Every bullet fired, every hand reaching for a mask, every breath drawn in that rotting air. Spencer had heard it before. In the vault, in the scream, he didn't need the progenitor's code. He'd seen its blueprint in how her terror rewired brains, a virus of the mind, not the body, a contagion of fear so surgical it turned heroes into hollows. Survivors didn't escape. They carried the payload. What does a tyrant do when enemies are too strong? He becomes their shadow. When science fails, he becomes the wound. Spencer's genius wasn't in creation. It was in erosion. A father who buried his daughter alive, not to study her, but to make her the ghost haunting every decision her killers would make. The mansion's doors closed on a girl's scream. They opened on a war. In the silence that followed, the world didn't hear Lisa Trevor's death. It heard her echo. They buried her in silence, a cage of whispers, her mind a labyrinth. Umbrella didn't seek cures. They forged a weapon that screamed back, every syllable of her pain a key. Not in vials, not in data, but in the echo of a girl who learned to scream in frequencies the dead could hear. What does a war sound like when it haunts? The Bravo team didn't die in the mansion, they dissolved in it. Survivors emerged with eyes that no longer recognized light. A child's voice echoed through halls, shrill, unbroken. Lisa Trevor's screams weren't sound, they were a fracture in time. Umbrella hadn't weaponized a virus, they weaponized memory. Bravo's massacre was a rehearsal. Umbrella's psychologists charted how grief curdles into fear. How resolve shatters when a girl's cries outlast bullets. Lisa's containment wasn't a lab experiment, it was a siege. 30 years of whispers trained to unravel S.T.A.R.S. thread by thread. Survivors carried her voice in their bones. Every mission became an echo chamber, every shadow a trigger. Umbrella's true progeny wasn't a pathogen, it was the silence left after the screaming. A voice cracks, not Lisa's, the narrator's. How do you quantify a life spent as a weapon? Lisa Trevor's fate isn't in files or test tubes. It's in the hollows of every soldier who heard her and lived. The cost wasn't bodies, it was the death of certainty. The price of a war fought in frequencies the dead still hear. What if the key to progenitor wasn't a formula? What if it's the mind of a girl who never learned to stop screaming? Her screams became a blueprint, not for a cure, for a weapon. Umbrella didn't study Lisa Trevor's body, they mapped the architecture of her unraveling. Each shattered synapse a note in a symphony, each fractured memory a code. The progenitor virus thrived not on DNA but on human terror's alchemy, a virus that feeds on minds' collapse. They kept her alive 3 decades, not to heal, to break, to breed, a prototype for psychological annihilation. S.T.A.R.S. wasn't the enemy, they were the test subject. A unit to measure madness's spread. What does a girl become after 30 years of doors opening to shadows, after every face dissolves into the man in the lab coat? Lisa Trevor's name became a ghost in the machine, a whisper in static between experiments. Umbrella's scientists called it adaptation, the body's refusal to die, the mind's refusal to comprehend. A girl who learned to scream in silence, who carved her agony into the virus's DNA. The progenitor's deadliest strain didn't emerge from a petri dish. It emerged from a girl who forgot how to sleep, how to trust, how to stop being. They built bunkers to contain her, never realizing the true containment was her. A living vault of trauma, a human cipher for the virus's evolution. Every infected host carried a fraction of her nightmare, an echo of doors slamming, of hands through bars. S.T.A.R.S. fought bioweapons. They didn't know they were fighting a ghost, a girl who became the weapon's soul, who turned her suffering into a language the virus could speak. What war are we really fighting, when the enemy isn't the thing that hunts you, but the thing you became to survive it? Lisa Trevor's fate remains unwritten, but her scream. It pulses in every vial of progenitor, a hymn to the cost of adaptation, a warning no lab can quantify. Her scream didn't end with the T-virus. Containment began years before Raccoon City burned. By 1998, Umbrella's labs sprawled across 7 continents. Lisa Trevor was never a specimen, she was a message. A cipher, a psychological scalpel twisted in S.T.A.R.S.'s collective wound. They didn't need to kill her, they needed her to remember. The files vanish after 1998, no burial, no trace. Only whispers of a girl whose mind became a vault. What key could unlock it? What price would Umbrella pay to hear her thoughts? Their empire collapsed. New shadows rose in its place. Bioweapon programs now wear civilian masks, but the architecture of suffering, unchanged. A girl's torment became the blueprint, not for viruses, for control. The world adapts. The world forgets, yet in every locked facility, every vial of progenitor, a question hums. What if the weapon wasn't the virus? What if the weapon was the girl who never stopped screaming? Her name is dust, her purpose is legend, and somewhere deep in the machine, a ghost still whispers. The whisper threads through steel corridors, a girl's scream fossilized in glass. Umbrella didn't seek to cure, they sought to break. Lisa Trevor wasn't a subject, she was a prism. 30 years, her mind a locked vault, her pain the key. They thought trauma could be distilled, they thought horror could be weaponized. What does a corporation sacrifice when it bargains with ghosts? The S.T.A.R.S. hunters who found her didn't know they were walking into a mirror. Her silence was a language. Her suffering a code. They say the progenitor virus bends to will, but will isn't born in test tubes, it's forged in fire. In the marrow of a child who watches her mother's face dissolve into something ancient. Umbrella's true masterpiece wasn't Raccoon City, it was the space between Lisa's breaths. The way her eyes held galaxies of unspoken names. What would you trade to hold the world? A hand, a heartbeat, a memory of light. The labs are dust. The records are ash, but in the hollow where Lisa's voice once lived, something waits. Not a girl, not yet a god, a question, a wound, a lever. And somewhere a CEO turns a page. Her scream was the key and the lock. It echoed in server cores, a fractured melody umbrella carved into her bones. They didn't cage her to study viruses. They caged her to become one, a living ghost in the machine, her trauma coded into frequencies that unraveled minds like Raccoon City streets after the rain. Each wetter cry a payload. Each shattered breath a backdoor. S.T.A.R.S. bled not from bullets but from the static in their ears. Her voice, a parasite that made flesh forget its purpose. They called it a weapon. It was a wound kept raw for 30 years. A lever pulled by boardroom hands, turning her agony into a language only the dead could translate. And when the progenitor's truth was never in test tubes, but in the girl who never stopped screaming her scream was the key and the lock. It still hums in the dark, waiting to open something or keep something sealed. The CEO turns another page, the machine breathes. The CEO turns another page, the machine breathes. A name is etched in rust, Lisa Trevor. 30 years of torment not for science, but to weaponize a mind against those who sought the truth. A human ghost in the machine. Trauma, not DNA, became the key. What if the progenitor's truth wasn't brewed in labs, but screamed into the code of a girl who never